Okay, everyone, we're going to get started. We have a quorum right on 9:30, so good morning. Should we do attendance? I'd like to start with our attendance by announcing it, starting from the end of the table there, please.
Patrick Franklin, Urban League.
Jesse Sagnor, FAU.
Warren Dance, Cobra.
Sherry Brown, Budget Advisory Committee.
Paul Dumars, representative of the Finance Committee for the school district.
Wanda Paul, School District.
George Elmore, Economic Council.
David Porter, Construction Oversight Committee.
Leanne Evans, School District.
Mike Burke, School District.
John Gentithis, Alliance of Delray.
David Dolan, School District.
Susan Athley Dreyfus, School of the Arts, representing principals.
Sharon Schneiderman, representing PTA.
Radcliffe Brown, representing the Technical Advisory Committee.
Blair Littlejohn from the Office of General Counsel.
Okay, thank you. You want to do public?
We can do it around the room, too.
John Doherty, please announce yourself there.
Good morning, John Doherty, Facilities Construction. Ken Lasser, alternate to the quorum.
John Levinson, representing Stovich Architects, and Wharton Smith, General Counsel.
Ron Haran, Treasury.
Favor Avery, Facilities.
Dave Wilhelm, School District. Kate Saraswell, Transportation Director.
Okay, thank you. All right, any public comments today? None. Any issues with the minutes? Seeing none, they're accepted. On to you, Leanne.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the sales tax summary, the presentation we've developed to go over everything that we're covering. So to get started, the receipts, this is through the end of February. We'd collected $275 million versus the projection of $238 million. So we're at 115% of the projection that we'd expected to receive at this time. We've collected just over 20% of the proceeds at this point for this 10-year tax. Total expenditures through January. Sales tax expenditures are at $88.7 million. We have over $50 million in purchase orders open right now. That's work that's already been contracted, that's ongoing. And we've earned a little over $3 million of interest to date. And I'll remind you, the interest earnings is being set aside to deal with any borrowing. And that leads me right into the next comment. I wanted to let you know we are working on the borrowing. We've talked from the very beginning, we do some short-term borrowing. And we do need to get the facility in place by the end of June. So we've already sent out bid documents. We'll be doing something like a line of credit or commercial paper. It really depends on what structure comes in that's least expensive. So it's a short term, and the idea is that we'd be able to borrow when we need cash and then pay it back when we have cash. So it's not a long-term bond. It's definitely short-term just for cash flow purposes. So once those recommendations come in, they'll be going into the Finance Committee to review the structure and to make sure they're comfortable with the way we've got it set up. And there are at least there's two members of the Finance Committee here today. Sometimes you have three, so they'll probably come back at the May 31st meeting, and I may just nod to them and they can let you know how that review went. But they will get into the weeds on how the financing structure is set up. The bid documents we have right now is for a $250 million facility. But we've asked the banks to come up with something where we can only borrow maybe $100 million, which is what I think we would need to have a facility in place for. So we'd have a line of credit with an amount of $100 million with the ability to expand it to 200, and we may only draw $1 million. But if we only draw $1 million, there's still a cost to have the facility in place. So we want to do that, manage that as much as possible. So we're very intrigued with what the banks will bring back to us, and the goal is to get it the most economical tool, whatever it ends up being. So Finance Committee will get into the weeds on that at their April 26th meeting.
So we need the borrowing because we're going to be spending it faster than it's coming in?
We need the borrowing because state law says in order to issue a purchase order, you have to have the money available. So even though we have cash in place, we've received $275 million, we've spent 88. We've got close to $200 million in the bank. So cash-wise, we're fine on cash. But in order to issue all the purchase orders that we plan to issue, we need to have that in place. We don't necessarily have to draw down, but we need to have the facility in place because I don't know how fast those bills will come in. So we also are meeting with the auditors. I've asked for a meeting to go over with them to make sure how we want to show it in the financials. But ideally, we're just going to have a facility. It's much like you have a home equity line and you don't necessarily draw on it. We need to have something in place in case we need it.
So there's no cost if it just sits there?
There is a cost if it sits there. It's not as much as if we draw down on it. It may be, and I haven't seen any proposals yet, it may be 0.5% just to have the facility in place. And then once we draw, it'll be closer to 3%. But I've got to see what kind of quotes we get back. So we can certainly bring the results back to you. Your next meeting is May 31st. So this is when we've got committees that overlap in a sense, and that's why we have members of the Finance Committee on this committee, just like we have members of the Construction Oversight Review Committee on this. So the Finance Committee will actually review the structure of the transaction and approve it before it goes back to the board. This committee just needs to be aware, and we've been talking about it from the very beginning, that we'll need a short-term financing vehicle. And we'll work with the Finance Committee to get the best possible deal we can.
And the costs and fees of that are covered by the referendum sales tax money?
The goal is to cover it with these interest earnings. That's why we haven't spent it.
Okay.
So we'll continue to earn interest on all the money that we have. And the hope is that the interest expense will be less than the interest earnings. If we run short, and this is something when we look at and I can open it up, your sales tax financial summary reports this. We actually will be showing short-term debt issued to date, how much is outstanding, the interest payable, interest expense, and then we net out the interest earnings. So right now, you have a positive number there because there is no interest expense. So you'll be seeing this every quarter, so we'll know if it starts to get close. With the last sales tax, we actually netted, it was a positive $1 million. We were able to, and I don't want to get into the weeds on this, but we were able to meet the spend down requirements for IRS purposes, so we were able to keep interest earnings. It's a different interest rate environment right now, so I'm not sure if that, and the projects are different, so it's not a guarantee that we're going to be spending the money in the 6-month intervals that the IRS requires. So it's something we're going to monitor very closely, and I'm hoping to borrow only what we absolutely need to. If that runs short, that does come out of the sales tax proceeds. But we're setting aside the interest earnings and not touching those except to cover interest expense. So my goal is to make this work, but we'll keep you informed. I prepare this report monthly, so it's something that we're monitoring very closely. Currently, I'm sending it to you all on a quarterly basis and loading it online, but this is something you'll be seeing as we move forward. Okay. So I just went through all this with you, the sales tax short-term borrowing. We'll also be looking at the long-term borrowing. That is for the construction projects. So that's for Verity and Addison Meisner and the construction projects. That will also be coming into the Finance Committee on April 26th. It will be going to the board in August or September, so we can bring some more information back to you. But the Finance Committee, again, will drive the structure of the transaction. That does not, the cost of the long-term borrowing does not come out of the sales tax. Again, I remind you that referendum project list was a 2-sided document. One side is funded with sales tax. That's what we use the short-term borrowing for. The second side is projects to be funded from other sources, and that's what we'll need the long-term funding for. And that does not come from the sales tax funding directly. But it's still funding the projects, so we'll keep you informed on as we go forward with those. This is just the summary of where we're at, broken out by the different types of projects. So facility renewal, the technology, school buses, we break them all out. The original project budget, the current budget, the changes since the last meeting, the cumulative change, and the expenditures through January 31st. So you can see how the money's been spent and where the purchase orders are. At this point, we have no proposed plan modifications. We're going to talk about some that are coming that just we're not ready to get them into the package. I would like to take just a moment. We normally don't go into the details on these reports, but I want to point out something. On the facility renewal, the big project, the big report, I said there was no proposed plan modifications, but you see some here since November 1st. These are the items you approved at your January meeting. But for purpose of this report, it's looking at anything since November, so those are showing up. But you've already reviewed and approved them. There were no new proposed plan modifications. Before I move on, I just want to check and make sure to see if you have any questions on the detailed reports. This committee has said you don't want to go through the detailed reports in the meeting, but they're there, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the presentation, and the next part is on construction, and I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Dolan, and I'm sure I'll be chiming in, but I'll let him
I was going to say,
do the updates.
yes, I welcome some of Leanne's comments on these as well. As you can see, we do have $275 million in revenues, 272 committed to the projects. We have expended $89 million already, and as you'll notice, our diversity participation for both contractors and designers is excellent, and it's well above our standard requirements. I wanted to give again, my apologies, but we'll get into the weeds to the slightest bit. These next few slides kind of break down what the projects are that are going on. The way we started this program off, we did what we called FY 2018 schools. That's 10 schools right there. Last summer, we had a successful summer. We broke out 20 projects, both restrooms, plumbing, and classroom interior work. This summer, we're continuing in those same 10 schools. We've got 10 projects, which is basically the rest of the work for those 10 schools. Renovations, HVAC, electric, roofing, and site work, et cetera. Those are the big items. We do have, if we want to
Well, do we want
talk
to talk
about these or come
Yeah, let's
back?
go ahead and talk about these.
Okay. On these 10 schools, if we look at the 10 schools as a whole, not just the 20 from last summer and the 10 from this summer, but all told, those 10 schools, we've been fairly successful at staying on budget or under budget. What I will present to you informally now is that there are 3 schools where we do come up short on some of the scope, and we will be asking to move money from sales tax reserve to fund the overages. But overall, I want to let you know that combined, let's say those 3 schools, let's say that's $1.5 million. The other 7 schools combined, I will be giving back $3.5 million of money that didn't need to be spent. We were economical in how we approached the work. So if you look at the 10 schools as a whole, even with this future request to fund the shortfall, we will ultimately be giving back around $2 million.
When we come back to you at the next meeting in May, there will be 3 proposed plan modifications. 3 of the schools came in over budget. The proposals just came in Tuesday afternoon, and the numbers weren't finalized until late last night. So it was too late for me to add these into the report. So I just wanted we wanted to let the committee know there are 3 projects that are over budget. The other schools are under budget. So the goal is to take money from the sales tax reserve to increase the budget on the 3 schools. The other budgets will stay as they are. And when they're done, hopefully September, October, these schools will be done, completely finished, and we'll be able to do the closeout, and money will be coming back. It's going to be a net. Right now, we think it's about $1.9 million net will be coming back to the sales tax reserve, plus what we're going to draw down to use to get the project started. So normally we would be bringing you a proposed plan modification for these 3. They just came in late, and as I said, the numbers were just finalized last night. Yes. So I didn't want to try to rush and get something into you with it potentially is wrong. So we wanted to let the committee know there are 3 over budget. And this is not what we've seen before where we're moving things around from one year to the next. There's 3 that are over budget. Now, I think in looking at them, I think at the end of the day, 2 of them are going to end up under budget because there's other projects that are closing out. Some of these 20 are going to come in under budget. Right. There is 1 school, and I'll tell you, it's K.E. Cunningham, that is over budget, and it will be over budget. That one is about $1 million over budget. The other ones are much smaller dollar amounts.
What are the other 2?
The other 2 is Wellington Landings and Jupiter Farms. I mean, the numbers I have for that, and again, we just finished this last night. Jupiter Farms is over budget by $297,000. Wellington Landing is $122,000. Again, I think of the 20 projects of the 20 projects, some of them belong to those. I can already see some of them are coming in under budget. They're just not ready to close out yet. Right. So I think there'll be one net that'll be over budget, and we won't know that for certain until the projects are done.
Correct.
But even though we don't have the proposed plan modifications, I wanted to make sure we let you all know that these are coming in, and we'll bring them to you at the next meeting with the details.
I'll just add from the first sales tax referendum we had 10 years ago. I was on that committee for ISSOC as well. And the purpose of this committee is kind of what Leanne's explaining now, where we're here to make sure that the public and the parents and the kids get where they were told for each of the schools. And with the last committee, it was new schools here, new schools there, and some came in over budget because of inflation, some came in under budget. And it was this committee's job to decide for the public as to what was acceptable, where money should go, and that's what we'll be doing here. I've conferred with staff and made sure that all of the scope of work that each of the schools was meant to have is being completed. Some are going to be a couple bucks more, some are going to be a couple bucks less, and that's the purpose of this committee, to say, okay, the scope got done, that money goes back into the bank. We need it for another school to finish off the scope they were promised.
Thank you, excellent point. That I failed to mention that, but that's exactly the point, is every school is getting, all 10 of these schools are getting all the prescribed scopes.
So in May, we'll have the 3 proposed plan modifications for the 3 that are over budget. And at the meeting, probably, and I don't recall, I think the next meeting would be in October after the projects are done. So once the projects are done and closed out, actually it'd probably be November 8th that we'll pull together and we'll have the closeouts. We've asked several times, are any of the projects done? Are any of the schools done? This will be the first time we have schools done. So probably at that November meeting, if we can get all the projects closed out, we'll have the results for those and detail and check off the boxes that everything was done that was promised.
Well, all 10 are being worked on again only just this summer, right?
Right. All
Is there
10
any,
have
is there
worked on
any,
the summer.
any spring break work happening at these 10?
9 of the 10 have a lot of spring break work.
Oh, so they won't be done in May.
What's
Oh,
that?
November, yeah, they would be done.
They'll be done in November
They'll be done
because
this
they'll need spring break
break.
and
Meaning
summer.
2 weeks from now,
Right.
we will, and then go through the summer, and
Right.
at the end of the
There's
summer.
a spring break schedule in the presentation.
Oh.
So we'll.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Continue on. As we mentioned, we went into the 2018 projects. As you might recall from the last slide, we had basically broken the scope out on those 18 projects into sub-projects. What we're doing now, going forward on the 2019s and future projects, is no longer breaking them out into individual projects. 12 schools, 12 projects. One source, one scope, all encompassing of all the things that they were expected to get. These schools, we anticipate we will be starting this summer as well. These 12 schools are being prepared for close down, and we've got a healthy schedule that will start in June on these. But these will go through, and if I can, before we go into, these will all be 2-year schools, except for Palm Beach Lakes Community High. Because it's a high school, so big, so much work to do, that will be a 3-year. Generally, all high schools will take what we refer to as 3 summers to get the work done. Okay, next one. And as you'll see here, we've got the 2020 list up. We've already hired a lot of the architects and the CMs. As a matter of fact, of those 16 schools that we're referring to as 2020, the top 5, where that little break is, those are projects that we will start in the fall. We're not even waiting until next summer, not this summer, but next summer. We're going to start those in the fall, and then the remaining 11 will start in the summer of 20.
The intent is to accelerate the projects.
Thank you.
So as you'll see, as we go forward in the future, we will continue to accelerate the projects. I'm really concerned about the rate of inflation on construction, so we want to get as much as we can out of the way, and just concerned about an additional uptick on it. So,
Absolutely.
You say in the fall, but that means during school time?
Yes, absolutely. And just for reference, when we're referring to these deferred maintenance projects, these facility renewals, a lot of the work goes on in the summer. We mentioned this in the past. Close the school down, a lot of work, especially overhead work where disturbing kids would be a problem. We do a lot of that work in the summer, but we've been really fortunate. We do a lot of work during the school years too. During the school year, we'll work in classrooms where teachers don't have any students in, or a wing, or we'll work on nights and weekends on some of the scopes. We'll work on breaks, Thanksgiving, Christmas, spring break.
You know,
So
the
constantly
reality
moving.
is that each summer gets shorter. And so we have to take advantage of the time that we have. I want to also point out that we added an additional staff member, Larry Clausen. He's the former principal at Palm Beach Gardens. And so he's really helping us coordinate directly with principals on trying to adjust to the work. And so our goal is not to disrupt the educational effort. So he'll be real instrumental in helping us with that.
Yep. Okay. I think this is the last slide. This is just a general overview of the projects mentioned earlier. Verde and Washington are projects that are out and should be starting very soon. Verde over the summer, Washington in the fall. We also have a number of projects that are generally teed up and ready to start moving forward. We're working on the scope for Delray Full Service. We did get approval for the new high school in the Lake Worth area. We are finalizing the scope for Plumosa School of the Arts expansion. We've got a number of transportation projects, but we're starting with a new one, the transportation at Belvedere, Skis Road, Belvedere. That is our new facility that'll help support
The Western expansion.
Western expansion. Sorry, thank you. Yes. So we're working on that. We anticipate we'll be putting out an RFP for that very shortly. And then Boca Raton, the 05C, we all know that we've gotten the approval on that. We are working with the city of Boca to finalize and work out the land that we'll need for the new school. The new school will go on the property that we are currently housing the holding school for the Verde work and the Washington work, which is next to Don Estridge.
It's Addison. and
So
Verde.
let me correct
Verde
that.
and
So the
Addison
holding
Meisner.
school currently is for Verde and Addison Meisner to pass through as their new schools are being constructed. At the end of that construction, then we'll start on building the 05C Boca Elementary School. Our intent is to own the land. I have a very aggressive timeline working with the city to see that we can have possession of the land so we can start building the Boca School immediately after the last school passes through.
And that school's going on the same land where the temporary school
The
is?
same land and probably a little additional space.
Right.
Is that the land behind the school,
No.
or is that the land along Military, or is that along Spanish
It's,
River Boulevard?
It's neither. It's to the south of Don Estridge in the park.
Because they've cleared a whole track there. That was just-
Yes.
That cleared area is where
okay, that
that's
was
to
my
the south of Don Estridge,
Okay,
yes.
perfect.
Just so you know, this list of projects, only the Transportation Center is funded with sales tax. The other projects are going to be funded with other funding sources. They're on the referendum list, so we report to you. But they'll be funded with the long-term debt issue that we'll be doing. You do have one more slide.
Oh, I did. Okay, yes, and we have an aggressive security program moving forward. We've got 44 either in process or done, 30 that are moving forward towards start of construction, and we are also planning on implementing a new method to get a lot more of the work done faster. And when we get that rolled out, we'll bring that to you and let you know what that is. And as Wanda mentioned, this is our spring break. Everybody wants to know what's happening. You'll see the first 9 schools. That's actually the 2018 schools that we've been working on for the last year plus. So we've got an aggressive scope to get this work done. And then there are a number of other projects. Maintenance is working with us. They are doing a number of chiller replacements, some tracks. We have an aggressive program for demolishing old wooden portables, and what better time to do it than when the kids are not at school. So we'll take advantage of the spring break and try to get as many of those done as we can.
There's a few of the projects here are not sales tax projects, for example, adult ed. It's a major project for us. It's not on the referendum list. So I think when we show this next time, we may add asterisks to show which ones are sales tax and which ones aren't. This is all the work. There's a tremendous amount of work being done in spring break. Most of it is related to sales tax, but there's a few in here that I noticed are not. So we'll make sure that's clear in the future.
No trips to Cancun for Miss Paul or the team, I guess.
That's not happening this year.
Dave, I saw up there, it looks like a couple slides up, you don't have to go back up. You were doing a roof project after all the interior work had been done. It looked like for one of the schools, roof was being done and interior work had already been done. I forget which one it was, but are we trying to do roofs before we do interior work?
Generally, we
Okay.
are. When if it referred to some of the projects from last summer, we were focused, because of the start that we had to focus on getting a lot of the interior work done.
Right.
We had no questions on any of the interior projects where we felt like a roof would jeopardize the impacts of the work that was done in the summer before.
Okay.
Yeah, the 2018 projects, they were set up when we were still managing the sales tax based on the program. So by roof, by flooring, by playgrounds, by air conditioning. And remember, this committee agreed that we do it school by school. So when we look at some of these projects, Wellington Landings, we looked at it yesterday, there's 13 different projects at that school. So, we're so grateful we were able to move this to school by school. That's why you see those 18 projects and you see 19 and 20, where 20 is only, there's 12 schools and 12 projects. It's a lot easier to manage and to make sure everything works smoothly. Dave and I were talking last night about possibly bringing you back an example of one of them to show you just all the different projects. And one of the challenges we have is some of those were done in year 1 and year 2, and they need to close out to fund the other ones. Very difficult to manage that. So we're very thankful this committee agreed to move it to the project by project, so school by school.
Yes. Any questions for Dave? Okay.
Okay, our next meeting is scheduled for May 31st at 9:30. The other dates are listed on the back of your agenda, which you have in the package, and it's online. All the materials will continue to post online and make it available to you. And if you have any questions, please let me know. If there's anything we're not reporting that you'd like to see, we always want to know that, because if you want to see it, then chances are other people do as well. So please continue to give us feedback. We greatly appreciate it.
I think for, maybe Dave, if you can, for the next meeting, since you'll be getting near closing some stuff out, or even the meeting after that, a quick little PowerPoint slideshow of showing before and after conditions,
Oh, absolutely.
I think would be helpful for the committee to see the visuals, like, okay, this is what the toilet room used to look like, now look at it.
Absolutely, and we're actually working with communications. We've done a lot of the pre-work, we've done a lot of the photos from the summer work, so we might be able to do a sequencing of how we started and how we got through the end of the project.
That design is well.
Usually we try to bring a video, and there's so much work queuing up that I couldn't find a good video for today. So you have a lot of statistics, a lot of information on the screen, but we should have some videos for the next meeting after the spring break.
Absolutely. Spring break will, we're working with communications to make sure they know exactly where the good stuff is. We want to be able to see all the benefits to the students that they'll come back to.
They need to bring in some Dreyfus interns from the communications department. I know my daughter did that when she was at Dreyfus. So, any other questions about anything for the committee? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.